November 8, 1942, the beaches of Operation Torch in North Africa. American GIs huddled behind sand dunes as German panzers roar across the desert, their 75mm guns slicing through Allied lines like a scythe through wheat. For the men on those beaches, this is the nightmare every military planner has dreaded since tanks first appeared in Europe. Private First Class Robert Watson raises his M1 rifle toward the approaching Panzer, fully aware that his .30-06 round will do nothing to 3 inches of hardened steel. His platoon shares the same grim truth. They have no weapon capable of stopping an enemy tank, not a single one. What Watson doesn't know, what no American soldier on that shoreline understands, is that strapped to the back of his sergeant is a device that will change anti-tank warfare forever. It weighs just 13 pounds, costs only $43 to make, yet can punch through more armor than guns 50 times its size. Its inventor, Henry Mohaupt, had never seen a tank in battle, never attended a military academy, and had never fired an artillery round. His experience came from farming and industrial explosives, skills that seemed irrelevant to the deadliest engineering challenge of World War II. 4 years earlier, he was mixing chemicals in a makeshift Swiss laboratory, trying to improve blasting methods for mining. By accident, he discovered something that would turn a Swiss farm boy into the man responsible for giving ordinary soldiers the power to destroy the most advanced armored vehicles ever built. The device on Sergeant Miller's back bears the designation M1A1 bazooka, a weapon that would terrify German tank crews from Tunisia to Berlin. Yet the story of how a farmer's explosive experiment became America's most feared infantry weapon remains one of the war's most astonishing chapters. When Germany invaded Poland on September 1, 1939, the world witnessed the birth of Blitzkrieg. In just 18 days, German panzers shattered Polish defenses, proving that modern warfare belonged to those who controlled fast, heavily armed armored forces. Traditional anti-tank tactics, designed for static trench warfare of World War I, collapsed instantly under the speed and power of mobile armored formations. Allied experts analyzed the Polish defeat with increasing dread. British doctrine depended on 2-pounder guns firing solid steel shot, relying purely on kinetic energy to penetrate armor. Physics, however, was merciless. To punch through thick plate, a projectile had to be incredibly heavy and travel at extreme speeds, which required massive guns, bulky ammunition, and perfect positioning. The reality was devastating. A 2-pounder anti-tank gun weighed over 1,800 pounds and needed a truck to move. Once in place, it could not be shifted quickly in battle. German tank commanders exploited this flaw with precision, advance rapidly, force the gun crews to engage at long range where accuracy is poor, then close to point-blank distance where the guns cannot rotate fast enough to track moving tanks. American observers came to even more alarming conclusions. Colonel Leslie McNair, the architect of U.S. ground forces doctrine, studied pre-war exercises and issued a blunt warning. The American 37mm anti-tank gun was ineffective against modern armor at realistic combat distances. To penetrate the front of a German tank, it required a direct hit at under 400 yards, ranges at which the tank could easily destroy the gun first. Scientists scrambled to solve the crisis. Dr. Charles Lawrenson at Caltech even proposed electromagnetic railguns capable of launching projectiles at unprecedented speeds. But the technology required enormous electrical generators, making it utterly impractical for the battlefield. The seemingly obvious solution was to increase projectile velocity with longer barrels and more powerful propellants. German engineers embraced this idea fully. Their feared 88mm gun could destroy any Allied tank from more than 2,000 yards away. But such power came at a cost. The gun weighed over 16,000 pounds and needed a heavy tractor to position. An uncomfortable consensus soon formed. Effective anti-tank weapons had to be huge, expensive, and nearly immobile. Lightweight weapons simply couldn't generate the kinetic energy needed to pierce modern armor, while heavy guns couldn't redeploy fast enough to counter mobile panzer tactics. German armored forces had created a tactical dilemma that traditional engineering could not solve. Reports from North Africa only heightened the alarm. German tank units displayed advanced coordination, attacking in teams to overwhelm defensive lines. Even when Allied guns scored hits, panzers frequently shrugged them off and kept fighting. And building enough heavy anti-tank guns to counter German production was beyond Allied industrial capacity. Into this atmosphere of tactical panic and technical dead ends steps one of the most unlikely figures imaginable. He has no degree in military engineering, no combat experience, and no formal weapons training. His background is in agricultural chemistry and mining explosives, skills that seemed completely irrelevant to tank warfare. Yet Heinrich Mohaupt is about to prove that the answer to the most pressing military problem of the century does not lie in bigger cannons or more engine power, but in a fundamental misunderstanding of how explosives actually function. Henry Mohaupt was born on August 16, 1915, in the quiet Swiss village of Egg outside Zurich. He grew up surrounded by the smell of chemicals and the sound of technical debates. His father, Berthold, was an industrial chemist who specialized in mining explosives, and conversations about blast patterns, rock fractures, and detonation effects were as common in their home as conversations about weather. Young Heinrich showed little enthusiasm for academics. After struggling through school, he completed vocational training as an electromechanic, a practical trade that promised steady work but offered no hint of a future as a groundbreaking weapons designer. At 19, he fulfilled his obligatory Swiss military service with completely unremarkable performance. By all appearances, he was destined for a quiet, ordinary civilian life. Everything changed by sheer accident. Working as a technical chemist in Zurich, Heinrich set up a small lab in 1936 where he experimented with industrial blasting charges. His goal was simple and commercial: develop better, more precise explosive techniques for Switzerland's mining industry. Miners needed charges powerful enough to break rock, but gentle enough not to damage valuable ore. Then, during what should have been a routine experiment in late 1935, Heinrich made a discovery that would upend the physics of warfare. He placed a small explosive charge inside a metal cone, assuming the blast would radiate outward in all directions, as every explosive normally does. But instead, he watched the force concentrate into a razor-thin, impossibly powerful jet that punched straight through a steel plate. The effect had been known to science since 1888, the Monroe effect, but dismissed as a curiosity with no military use. Unlike academic weapons experts, Heinrich immediately saw what they had missed. With his practical, farm-bred mindset and hands-on experience with explosives, he realized that this focused blast could make small, lightweight charges outperform even the biggest anti-tank guns. The insight was elegantly simple. Traditional anti-tank weapons relied on kinetic energy, massive, solid projectiles launched at extreme velocities. That required huge guns, heavy ammunition, and enormous propellant charges. Shaped charges, however, operated on a completely different principle. They used chemical energy to form a superheated jet of metal capable of boring through armor regardless of the weapon's size or initial speed. The implications were revolutionary. A shaped charge weighing just a few pounds could pierce more armor than a conventional 2-ton anti-tank gun. Better still, these charges worked equally well whether launched from a heavy artillery piece or from a simple tube a single soldier could carry on his back. For the first time in history, infantry could be given the power to kill tanks. But when Heinrich applied for approval to conduct larger tests, Swiss military officials dismissed his work outright. Colonel Hans Frick, head of Swiss Ordnance Development,
examined the young chemist's crude demonstration and delivered a harsh verdict. The Swiss Army needed proven kinetic energy weapons, not strange new ideas that contradicted established doctrine. The rejection didn't stop him. Through 1937 and 1938, Heinrich refined his designs, improved penetration, and solved technical challenges that serious weapons engineers insisted were impossible. His notebooks filled with formulas, sketches, and test results, ideas that would eventually change global warfare. His methods would have horrified professional ordnance designers. Heinrich melted scrap copper pipes in a homemade furnace, hammering the softened metal into conical shapes using old Swiss metalworking techniques. Every liner had to be perfect. Too thick and it wouldn't form a proper jet. Too thin and it would vaporize before penetrating armor. Working entirely by trial and error, he developed manufacturing techniques academics hadn't even considered. On October 26, 1939, he prepared his most promising prototype. He loaded the tiny shaped charge, barely larger than his thumb, and containing less explosive than a grenade, into a crude launching rig. His target was a section of railroad track, chosen because its thickness closely matched tank armor. If his theory was right, the small charge would outperform anti-tank guns hundreds of times heavier. The blast erupted in a bright orange flash, followed by the sharp crack of molten metal slicing through steel.
When the smoke finally cleared, Heinrich stared in disbelief. A perfectly round hole had been punched straight through the section of railway steel, the kind of penetration that normally required a full-sized anti-tank gun firing at point-blank range. But any hope he felt was short-lived. Later that year, when British ordnance officers reviewed his demonstration in Zurich, their reaction was immediate and dismissive. Major Geoffrey Williams of the Royal Arsenal inspected Heinrich's rough prototypes with open contempt. "Mr. Mohaupt," he said coldly, "the British Army needs reliable, field-tested weapons, not laboratory curiosities that work under ideal conditions and fail in real combat." The French were even harsher. After Heinrich traveled to Paris in search of a development contract, French weapons specialists delivered the verdict that nearly killed his invention altogether. "Monsieur Mohaupt, your hollow charge concept contradicts established ballistics principles. No serious military force would risk its defenses on such exotic theories." American observers who attended his Paris tests filed reports echoing the same skepticism. "Subject's performance claims are not credible. Recommend no further consideration of hollow charge devices unless verified by qualified ordnance experts." The rejection was total. Every major military power dismissed Heinrich's discovery as the work of an amateur who did not understand the field he was trying to revolutionize. Seasoned weapons engineers simply could not accept that a Swiss farm boy with basic chemistry training had solved a problem that had eluded professionals for decades. Heinrich now faced a brutal choice: give up and return to industrial work, or continue alone against a wall of expert condemnation. The question became irrelevant in June 1940 when German forces conquered France, wiping out his primary opportunity for development and leaving him isolated in neutral Switzerland with a revolutionary technology that nobody wanted. What Heinrich could not have known was that across the Atlantic, the U.S. Army was about to discover that its entire anti-tank doctrine had collapsed. That crisis would finally force someone to listen to a farmer's strange but powerful idea. On October 18, 1940, at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, America's top anti-tank specialists gathered to witness what many assumed was a pointless demonstration. After months of delays, Henry Mohaupt, now in the United States, stood beside a folding table covered with his crude prototypes. Around him, officers and civilian scientists watched with doubt, irritation, and in some cases, open hostility. Colonel René Studler, chief of Army Ordnance Research, inspected the devices with a dismissive frown. "Mr. Mohaupt, these appeared to be modified mining charges, not military weapons. The U.S. Army requires proven anti-tank solutions,
not untested theories. Dr. Clarence Hickman, America's foremost ballistics expert, leaned in with thinly veiled annoyance. Shaped charge effects have been known since the 1880s. We have studied them extensively and concluded they have no practical battlefield application. What makes you think you've discovered something every qualified expert has overlooked? Then Mohop fired his improved prototype. The blast lit the range in a brilliant flash. A split second later came the sharp, unmistakable hiss of superheated metal slicing through steel. When the officers examined the target, they found a perfectly round hole punched straight through armor that no existing infantry weapon could penetrate. A long, stunned silence followed. Dr. Hickman spoke first, his tone suddenly clinical and precise. The penetration achieved by that device is 3 times greater than that of our 37mm anti-tank gun. If this effect can be reproduced reliably, it constitutes a fundamental breakthrough in anti-tank technology. The room exploded in argument. Major Thomas Reardon of the Field Artillery slammed his fist on the table. Our current anti-tank weapons are useless against German armor. If this Swiss civilian has something that actually works, why are we trying to dismiss it? Captain Edward Ull, a young ordnance engineer, spoke quietly but firmly. Sir, our reports from North Africa show penetration rates of less than 15% at combat ranges. If Mr. Mohop's design improves those numbers, we must explore it, regardless of how unconventional it is. General Campbell raised his hand to restore order, but the debate only intensified. Dr. Charles Lorentzen from Caltech delivered the harshest technical criticism. This contradicts everything we know about weapons design. Small explosives cannot outperform large-caliber guns. We are being asked to gamble American lives on experimental physics. The turning point came when Colonel Robert Goddard, the father of American rocketry, picked up Mohop's drawings. Goddard was famous for unconventional brilliance, and every officer in the room fell silent as he studied the drawings. What he said next would determine the future of the U.S. Army's anti-tank program.
Colonel Goddard spoke softly, but the entire room leaned in. Gentlemen, I've spent 20 years developing rocket technology that most experts dismissed as impossible. Mr. Mohop's shaped charges use familiar physical principles, simply applied in a way no one else has attempted. What we witness today is entirely consistent with established thermodynamics. Colonel Studler made one last attempt to block the project. Dr. Goddard, are you suggesting we rewrite American anti-tank doctrine based on a single field test created by an unproven inventor? The financial and tactical risks are enormous. General Campbell rose from his chair, his mind made up. Colonel, our doctrine has already failed in North Africa and Europe. German armor dominates every battlefield it enters. If Mr. Mohop's technology offers even a marginal improvement, we cannot afford to ignore it. He turned to Mohop. You have full funding, top priority classification, and every resource you need. Prove that your shaped charges can survive real combat. The room fell silent. America's weapons establishment had just committed itself to the most unconventional gamble in its history, betting that a Swiss farm boy's homemade explosives could stop the German war machine. If you're fascinated by World War II's forgotten weapons, keep watching, because this ridiculous invention is about to become the tank killer every American infantryman carries. But first, Mohop has to survive the bureaucratic war waged against him. June 14, 1942, Aberdeen Proving Ground. Henry Mohop watched nervously as technicians loaded his newest shaped charge warhead into an experimental launcher, a crude metal tube that would soon become known to the world as the bazooka. 18 months of development had turned his Swiss mining experiment into America's most promising anti-tank weapon. Now it faced its ultimate test, a captured German Panzer IV with 80 millimeters of frontal armor, the same armor that had made German tank units almost invulnerable to Allied infantry.
Conventional 37mm anti-tank guns needed an average of 17 direct hits to destroy such a target. Mohaupt's shaped charge warhead weighed just 3.4 pounds, but its explosive energy was focused with mathematical precision. Sergeant First Class Edward Uhl raised the launcher, aimed at the Panzer's turret, and fired. The rocket streaked out at 270 feet per second. A brilliant flash erupted, followed by violent secondary explosions as the tank's ammunition detonated. Inspectors found a perfectly circular hole cut straight through the turret's thickest steel. Mohaupt had achieved what experts insisted was physically impossible, giving a single infantryman the power to kill a tank. Systematic testing stunned observers. The M1 bazooka achieved an 89% hit rate against still targets up to 200 yards, better accuracy than many conventional anti-tank guns. And weighing only 13.2 pounds loaded, it could be moved and fired faster than enemy tanks could locate or eliminate it. But laboratory success meant nothing until it proved itself in real combat. November 8, 1942. Operation Torch, North Africa. American forces prepared to test shaped charge weapons under fire for the first time. Private First Class Robert Murphy crouched behind a sand dune near Oran as German Panzer IIIs rolled toward Allied lines. In his hands was an M1A1 bazooka loaded with Mohaupt's shaped charge warhead, the first time any soldier in history carried a personal weapon capable of destroying a main battle tank. Murphy fired. The shaped charge warhead hit the Panzer's turret ring and detonated with perfect precision. A jet of superheated copper, traveling at 20,000 feet per second, burned through the armor and ignited the ammunition inside. The tank erupted in flames. Its crew abandoned the vehicle, defeated by a weapon that cost less than a factory worker's monthly wage. The German response was immediate and alarmed. Oberst Klaus Weber of the 501 Heavy Tank Battalion filed an urgent report. American infantry now possess weapons capable of penetrating Tiger armor at close range. Our standard tactics must be revised immediately. The psychological effect was even more profound. Hauptmann Rudolf S., a panzer commander with 43 tank kills, wrote, "These American rocket weapons turn every patch of ground into a potential tank trap. We can no longer advance confidently. Any hidden soldier may destroy us with one shot." Combat data from Tunisia confirmed the revolution. In 6 months, American bazooka teams destroyed 312 tanks, more enemy armor killed by infantry weapons than in all previous U.S. operations combined. Each pound of bazooka equipment destroyed an average of 1.7 tons of German armor. But the weapon's defining moment came in Sicily in July 1943, when Staff Sergeant Charles Kelly, armed with an M1A1 bazooka, faced the most feared tank of the war, the German Tiger I. With 100 millimeters of frontal armor, no Allied gun could reliably penetrate. Kelly's first shot struck the Tiger's treads, immobilizing the 57-ton giant.
Kelly's second rocket slammed into the Tiger's turret armor, punching through the steel, killing 2 crew members, and detonating the tank's ammunition stores. The Tiger's commander, Oberleutnant Hans Kluge, abandoned the burning vehicle and reported to headquarters in disbelief. American infantry weapons now pose a greater threat to our armor than their tanks. Immediate changes to close support tactics are required. The implications were enormous. Patton, watching bazooka teams in action during the Sicilian campaign, issued new directives that reshaped Allied doctrine. Every rifle company will maintain its own anti-tank capability with rocket launchers. We no longer need vast concentrations of heavy anti-tank guns to halt armored attacks. The ultimate confirmation of Mohaupt's invention came from the Germans themselves. Engineers studying captured bazookas in Tunisia immediately began copying the design, producing the 88mm Panzerschreck, a larger, more powerful replica of the American launcher. German troops mockingly nicknamed it the Ofenrohr,
recognizing both its crude simplicity and devastating effectiveness. By December 1943, U.S. factories were producing 8,000 bazooka rockets every day, enough shaped-charge warheads to destroy every tank in the German army twice over. What began as a Swiss farmer's mining experiment had become the most mass-produced precision anti-tank system in world history. Technical Sergeant James Thompson, a veteran of 37 bazooka engagements from Tunisia to Normandy, described the weapon's impact best. Before bazookas, seeing a German tank meant running and hoping someone with a big gun was close. After bazookas, every infantryman was a tank killer. That Swiss guy Mohaupt didn't just give us a new weapon, he changed ground combat forever. The numbers proved it. German tank losses to infantry weapons increased by 850% between 1942 and 1945. Allied casualties from tank fire dropped by 65%. Mohaupt's shaped charges had given ordinary soldiers the ability to destroy the most advanced armored vehicles ever built. And this story is far from over. May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. As the Reich collapsed, captured Wehrmacht reports revealed the true scale of Mohaupt's impact. More than 15,000 German tanks and armored vehicles were destroyed by infantry weapons, more than by Allied tanks and anti-tank guns combined. Post-war records showed staggering production numbers. Between 1942 and 1945, U.S. factories built over 20 million bazooka rockets, more precision anti-tank munitions than existed in the entire world before the war. The program consumed the industrial equivalent of building 500 heavy bombers, yet delivered tank-killing power to every infantry squad in the U.S. Army. German experts interrogated after the war openly acknowledged American superiority. Dr. Frommert, Germany's leading shaped-charge researcher, admitted, "Mohaupt's warhead design surpassed our capabilities throughout the war. The Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck were crude imitations of American technology that we never fully mastered." Field Marshal Gerd Rundstedt was even more blunt. "American infantry rocket weapons forced us to rewrite all armor doctrine. Our tanks could no longer support infantry without unacceptable losses. Any lone soldier with a launcher had the power to destroy a 60-ton vehicle." Mohaupt's influence didn't end with World War II. It became the foundation of modern anti-tank warfare itself. His shaped charge principle appears in every major anti-tank weapon of the modern era. The Javelin, the Tau, the AT-4, the RPG series, the NLAW, all of them trace their lineage directly to the experiments he performed in Switzerland in 1935. Master Sergeant Robert Chen, a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, described his AT-4 with awe. "This thing weighs less than 15 pounds, but it can destroy any tank ever built. And the tech inside it, that was invented by some Swiss guy during World War II. 80 years later, his idea is still saving soldiers' lives." Modern shaped charge warheads can penetrate armor more than 7 times their own diameter, meaning a warhead barely the size of a fist can burn through the frontal armor of a modern battle tank. This democratization of anti-tank power has made heavy armor increasingly vulnerable and increasingly expensive to protect. Henry Mohaupt died quietly in Santa Barbara, California on May 20, 2001. His obituary in the local paper barely mentioned his wartime contributions, exactly the way he preferred it. In a world where technology decides the fate of nations, a Swiss farmer's son proved that revolutionary ideas can come from the most unlikely places. Mohaupt's shaped charges didn't just destroy tanks. They reshaped global warfare, one precisely focused explosion at a time.